The early days was very trying. I was very committed to it, even though there was all sorts of warning signs. Perhaps I shouldn't. We were definitely early in the game, and if you follow indoor agriculture or controlled agriculture now, it's quite advanced. But back then, we were really the only company in Canada doing anything, and it was hard. It was very difficult. And just to give you some color, again, I spent 20 years in the medical device business, healthcare, clinics, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a very far departure. My wife really honestly thought I was crazy. I went to the Department of Agriculture downtown Halifax and saying, could I have some help? And they, you know, it's kind of a bit of a joke, but they looked at what I was doing and recommended perhaps I should do it in another province. So that was my start. The government thought I was crazy. My wife thought I was crazy. So it's not a really good platform to get going. But honestly, the one of the best experiences of my life was setting up in Truro and getting to meet many of you. And what I recall was very, very difficult work we were doing, but just an overwhelming amount of support from Truro, from the Agriculture College, and again, I can reference many of you on this call, Perennia, investors. I can name the names that you probably know from Truro. And for me, I was just overwhelmed that this community took a guy like me in who had no right growing anything or anything to do with farming. And at this stage, it was quite, futuristic. And I'll never forget that. And that was sustained for many years, and I think was a key differentiator for us to survive. And many early stage startups, of which this Novagevity, which I'll get to in a second, is my seventh. And so I have a colleague of mine joining today, Victoria Dimmick, who's a graduate of the Dalhousie Ag. I hope probably many of you know. She currently is a teammate of ours at Novagevity who's doing incredible work. And she's going to help me just kind of throw up a couple of slides to take you through kind of where we're at and kind of the background. I don't want to go on too much about TruLeaf because I want to share some ideas and thoughts today on where we're at. If you want to go to the next slide, Victoria. There you see TruLeaf. Many of you probably heard about it. It very quickly, it is one of the most amazing stories in Canada, in my opinion. And I say that obviously I'm biased, but I've worked with so many great people. And we went from obscurity to if I could tell you how many months I worried about making payroll. And then a light switch went off. And the light switch was the world started to wake up to realize perhaps that we need to figure out other ways to grow food and plants and not just traditional field crops. And I got on my plane and went to Japan, and we actually had professors from University of Chiba in Japan visit our facilities in Truro and really dug deep into figuring out who can help me. And honestly, when I went throughout the world, the Japanese were very beneficial. I went to Holland many times, they were beneficial. And Truro was very beneficial. And I did go to the University of Guelph, but I quite frankly was, I hope through this talk, by the way, I can be somewhat opinionated. So I'm just throwing out a disclaimer. I don't want to offend anybody, but I just found the University of Guelph rather limited. And so we prototyped and we prototyped and we prototyped. And then the world, and most importantly, when the world started to say we needed to figure out good, clean food, and shorten these supply chain miles, and we'll talk about supply chain in a second. And then the capital started following, and I was very fortunate enough to meet some folks. And anyway, we raised quite a bit of money. Eventually, some Toronto investors became interested. Eventually, McCain Foods became very interested, and they placed a minority investment. And at that time, that I was 11 years into this, and I was quite frankly burnt out. This took all the good out of me. In many ways, it was a 24/7 endeavor. I was basically living in Toronto. I never saw my family very much, but I was still committed. And so I went to McCain's. I said, you know what? I can tell, you guys want to take this ball here, and I needed a break. So I stayed on the board for about another year, and as Jolene referenced, it took McCain's. It's not uncommon to see a big company like McCain's, and they see a shiny object like TruLeaf and they want it. And obviously, when I presented to McCain family and board one day about this company, TruLeaf, I said to them, I said, you know what? My friends and I, when we go to restaurants now, we don't order fries, we order salad. And I was thought they're either going to like that comment or throw me right out of the room. If it eventually worked. And I kind of went on I retired, which I really needed a break. And now, of course, as Jolene referenced to, it took them 2 or 3 years, I think, honestly, folks, to figure out what they had. There's some positives and negatives like these deals that happen. Obviously, for me financially, it was game changing. And now I understand that TruLeaf is. When I handed it to McCain's, and with the help of Truro and Dal Ag and everybody there, I know we were one of the top three in North America. They faltered a little bit. I think it took some time to figure it out, and now it seems like they're getting back on track. And as Jolene referenced, they're opening a farm in Calgary, and I do believe Montreal. I led the design of the Guelph farm, which is really state-of-the-art, automated, robotic, incredible. It cost a lot of money, though, to figure that out, and I won't tell you how much. So that's TruLeaf. It was a great story. I retired. There was investors in Atlantic Canada, and particularly Truro, that did very, very well with their early investment, and they told me many times they invested in me and the cause, and that's all I had back then. So I'm very grateful for Truro for that. And then I retired, and then that lasted about 2 months. It was in the winter, and my two dogs and I were sitting around looking at each other, trying to figure out what to do. And then my co-founder, Dr. Mary Lynch, called me and said, "Thank you, Victoria." And this was an easy one for me. She called me in, and I've known Dr. Lynch for many years. She's an incredible doctor, excuse me, a pain specialist, and said, "Listen, Greg, I simply cannot give my patients any more of these current meal replacements." And what that is Boost and Ensure, and it's a lot of chemicals, and it's just really not, in my opinion, nutrition. It's empty calories and protein. So very quickly, I thought about it. And I think my wife was absolutely delighted that I was going to go do another startup and get back to work. And fast forward to 2 years, this has been an incredible company. And to see, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, to see the relationship of plants and medicine. And I really want to highlight that theme today with all of you, and we'll talk some more. So Mary and I put together a team, of which one our teammates, Victoria, is on the call today. And it was really about medical nutrition and this space of medical nutrition that we occupy. So Sperry is our first brand. It's a complete plant-based meal replacement. We worked very hard and spent some money on the formulation. It is probably the best, in my opinion, plant-based beverage on the market in the world for GI issues. We work with the top GI specialists in Canada. The early days were tough. Again, it's the startups are, for some strange reason, I enjoy them, but they're very hard. And the early formulations weren't very good tasting. But all of a sudden, we cracked it, and there's a team of about 12 of us, all from different walks of life. Nobody comes from really the plant world except perhaps myself. Nobody from the beverage world. There's some food science and some product development and marketing. And very quickly, this product, I've never seen the demand for a product in my entire career. We launched, we have an office downtown Halifax. We launched nationally in September. In October, we were the proud winners of the top new natural health product in Canada, which is a very significant deal and has created enormous like we have a lineup of customers that we're trying to meet. It's kind of like I use the analogy of planes on a runway, and it's more expensive than Boost and Insure, but the feedback we're getting from patients, it's really game changing. And what this is, ladies and gentlemen, is it's really the summary of my career. 20 years in healthcare and witnessing our healthcare system going downhill and downhill and downhill, witnessing the rates of chronic disease. And then I spent 10 years in an indoor agriculture tech company and trying to figure out how to scale. In my opinion, I was trying to scale nutrition. That came in the form of spinach and arugula and microgreens and broccoli, but really it was about scaling nutrition in a very resource efficient way, a controlled way. And now accumulation of that is Novagevity in our brand here, Sperry. So the feedback, we're working with every major medical institution in the country. We have, to give you some perspective, we are in about 100 doors in Atlantic, Canada. We launched very slow, very measured. Our website is doing very, very well. Month over month, we're getting doubling of growth, which is incredible. We go to 400 to 500 doors, I do believe, by April and May. So, and working with Sunnybrook, working with Sick Kids, BC Cancer Care. It's just a great company to do a lot of good and at the same time have a very viable financial business model. We have other products in the pipeline that's looking at plant formulations for, excuse me for one moment, my voice is going, for blood glucose and insulin control. It would be a pre-diabetic, diabetic beverage, which, as we all know, it would be a large market. We're looking at other beverages around pain and inflammation. So again, we're really sticking to this space of medical nutrition, which is very new and emerging, and leveraging plant crops, plant ingredients, and formulate them in a way that has solid medical defendable evidence. And I think I'm very proud of that. If you look at our DNA, we have a science advisory group nationally that's incredible. That goes coast to coast. That some of the names that you would probably recognize. So that's kind of Sperry. Where we manufacture in Ontario. It's a very difficult and complex beverage to manufacture. We have a warehouse in Ontario. We're growing very, very fast. Again, we're raising more capital. We're hiring, and this is the emails we get from patients. It's honestly, some of them have made me cry, to be quite frank, and it's life changing. And my mother, God love her, she was a lady that grew up on the farm in north of Winnipeg, and during the Depression, she was a foodie before everybody was a foodie. I grew up, at our house in New Brunswick. We had a garden outside. We had a garden at our cottage, and spent most of my life growing up eating vegetables with lots of dirt on them. And so this is kind of, again, the accumulation of it all, and to when she was dying of leukemia, and of acute leukemia, and she held up a bottle of Boost. This was actually, incidentally, it was 10 years ago tomorrow that she passed, but she held up a bottle of Boost. I'll never forget it. And she said, and she looked at the ingredients, and she was very smart enough to realize that corn syrup and sugar and all of these other little crazy things isn't what she should be drinking when she's very ill. And she looked at me and she says, "Why are the doctors making me drink this?" So when Mary Lynch called me about this product to do, that was the first thing that was embedded into my head was, okay, like, let's do this. And so here we are. So that's Sperry. It's very exciting. Victoria, again, who's on the call, is playing a big role. And again, here we are. One of our key teammates is a graduate from Dalhousie Agriculture College, and I want to talk a little bit more about that as we go. Go ahead, Victoria, to the next slide. So what are a couple of themes that I've learned over the years traveling the globe, working in the plant world and the ag world? And let me just preface this by saying, since I left TruLeaf, I have also kind of created a little bit of a venture firm where I've invested in 2 or 3 food and ag companies. And one thing is for certain, ladies and gentlemen, that that the capital markets it is looking the ag tech and food tech sectors are by far, excuse me, the most attractive in the capital markets right now. Yes, over the years it was ITC, and there's a lot of buzz about oceans, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But there is a massive amount of capital. Look, but the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is there's not enough bona fide good startups for them to place that capital. There's startups, but there's not enough solid ones that are compelling to raise that money and build a business. And but these so there's a lot of money out there, but there's two common themes, particularly now with COVID, or as we emerge from COVID, that in the ag, in the food world, that's crystal clear, and that's doing more with less, and that's cleaner and greener. What is doing more with less? Well, doing more with less, and I know Raj and Jolene and I believe a few others when I was there in TruLeaf, controlled environment agriculture is so big, and it doesn't just mean, as you folks know, it doesn't mean just vertical farms. It doesn't mean, it's greenhouses, it's hoop houses. It's the beautiful thing about controlled environment agriculture. If it's designed right, it allows the owner or the business to be creative. It's not one size fits all. What we did with TruLeaf is we built models relative to the market. We took in the cost, and we took in the local market, and then we designed a farming model for that, instead of saying, well, this is what it is, and it's got to fit in BC, it's got to fit in Florida, etc. So controlled environment agriculture, and we'll talk about more about that in a second. There's a company from India that I'm helping come to Nova Scotia called Cotex, COTEX. They've developed a very novel controlled release fertilizer, and I think that we're talking to them about setting up somewhere between Halifax and Truro. And whoever in the audience here might just want to park that and talk to me after, maybe, or another time, about perhaps there may be some collaboration. But this startup has all the big companies in the world after it. So fertilizer, controlled environment agriculture. Another big piece that I was working on with TruLeaf and a little bit in Truro and Dal Ag was around seed and seed genomic, and one massive opportunity that I was working on before I left was working with I was supposed to go visit Bayer, I do believe, in California, is working on creating seed profiles that fit controlled environment agriculture. And as we've learned, is that seeds have been developed for open field crop, but they really haven't been developed definitely not for vertical farming. And so again, that market has now really evolved, and some big time capital and companies have emerged. So that's just a few examples of doing more with less. I mean, there's a lot more I know in that discussion, but obviously it's about creating more efficiency, using less land. I'm involved with a robotic company that automates weeding. So there's lots of pieces like that. Now the other big light switch that I've seen that's gone on in the last couple of years, maybe the last 2 years, and let me just kind of give you a background. When I was raising capital with TruLeaf, we were valued at 1 year at about 10 million. And then when the Toronto investors came in, I think we were valued at about 20 million. And when McCain's came in, went up to about 60. And as of today, my sense is, because of doing more with less and because of cleaner and greener, the valuation of TruLeaf could be probably in the neighborhood of $600 to $700 million. And that's just a couple of farms. And you would look at that and go, well, that's illogical. And historically it would be, but we're not dealing with normal times right now in ag, in food, in capital, in consumer. So there's valuations being put on businesses that you would look at and go, holy cow. But look, I mean, I don't need to tell this audience of climate and the drought and flooding and so look at those poor BC farmers recently out west. I mean, and of course this is affecting supply chain, and we'll talk about that. But in the cleaner and greener, obviously resource efficiency is a massive one. Hydroponics. There's doing some interesting work at the Vashurn Center down in Cape Breton. What about energy, renewable energy or sustainable energy to farm to food? So those, those are, I'm just trying to be mindful of the time. Those are just some examples, but these two themes, in my opinion, if you're talking about commercialization, excuse me, in the world of ag tech and food tech, this is where it's at right now. If you're asking me about, again, viable businesses and capital markets and valuations and you know what I'm proud about TruLeaf, it TruLeaf brought in millions and millions and millions of dollars to Nova Scotia, and something that we need more of, and so that's kind of the kind of a couple of big themes. um, just looking at my notes here for a second, pardon me. Sorry, Victoria, if you could go to the next slide, please. So those two themes that I was referencing, when in my travels and my learnings, obviously they're very, very big. There's some, obviously, there's things like alternative proteins and that's obviously massive. But where do we go from here? And climate and COVID, and both of those items have just reared its ugly head the last 2 years, probably more so in the last 2 years than it has, honestly, in the last 20. Well, obviously COVID is unique, but I'm a student. I observe everything, and it's I that's kind of what I do. I observe macro forces and what's happening socially, and I design a business for it. I That's basically, I'm not a tech person, as Victoria knows very well, who's on the call. I'm not a great manager. I just like to look at what and more so now, what's also very attractive, and it's really inherently, folks, ladies and gentlemen, that it's what you do, is social driven, purpose driven enterprises. Their time has come as well, and we can wrap that around climate, and we can wrap that around COVID. But a couple of big ideas and themes here I would like to propose. First and foremost, I've always maintained Atlantic Canada, we are significantly exposed. And Jolene and I have had so many good chats, and we've talked about many different pieces of this puzzle. Atlantic Canada is so highly exposed. We're at the end of the food chain. We saw a little bit of this, some empty shelves. Our risk exposure is so high by the fact that still a massive amount of our food, our good food, meats, vegetables, dairy, perhaps not dairy is not a great example, but definitely fruit and veg, comes from so far away. And Atlantic Canada, from what I learned, is one of the sickest jurisdictions in North America, perhaps just behind Nunavut and Mississippi. And yet we're also the most nutrient deficient. And you see that now with people lined up out of all of our emergency rooms and doctors' offices. It's code red on that. And no doubt in my mind. I've worked in the healthcare system a long time, and I am deeply, deeply worried. Our health systems are in big trouble. And I've given talks about this for many, many years, and I deliver the same message, and it gets worse every year. And COVID has lifted the lid on this. We have no idea the damage and the cost yet. And I do understand why we need to shut businesses and tell people to stay home. But I do believe it's time for our government leaders and Tim Houston and Robert Strang to come out to everybody and work with folks like yourself and at Dell and at the other universities to say, what is the true cost? What's the damage here? And what's the social damage? What's the food damage? Look at food inflation right now. It's very, very worrisome. We're in a really precarious stage. And so where do we go from here? And I think when I want to just propose an idea is, and I understand, ladies and gentlemen, as researchers and as professors and PhDs, you have to do research. It's critical. And then I was exposed, and Raj, we did some work together and exposed to some really cool stuff that was going on at Dell Ag. Look, for years, folks, I worked in the medical world. I saw hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars go into Dalhousie Medical and QE to quote unquote commercialize. And honestly, to be very blunt, it was a massive failure. And it's a little better now, but the province is doubling down on med tech. The province is down on, right or wrong, it's, look at the farmers market. My wife and I went to the farmers market down on the waterfront last weekend, and it's gone. It's not gone. It's just a shell of what it was, and we're putting some other ocean incubator there. We got one in Dartmouth now and one in Halifax. The money spent on this is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, and the metric on that is it really hasn't attracted a whole lot of capital. If we put, ladies and gentlemen, if we took 10% of this money, sorry, just one second. If we took 10% of all this federal and provincial money and directed it to DalAg and created, let's just say, 2 or 3 really novel centers of excellence of research, controlled environment, smart farm, Jolene, absolutely. What, about the decentralization of food production. But honestly, I think Dalhousie Ag is incredibly positioned to assist our health crisis. And how do we connect those dots? Well, Sperry is Exhibit A. We are inherently researching plant ag ingredients, and we are converting this into a product that is scalable, that's accessible, and that's economical. And boy, oh boy, does healthcare need that right now. And yes, we went through 20 years, and I saw out of all the money going into pharmaceutical drugs, which is a nasty business, and for many ways on surgeries, but we have to. It's absolutely critical. We've got to move to a culture and a thinking of around disease reversal and avoidance. And this is where Dalhousie Ag comes in. Dalhousie Medical School, trust me, they are not suited to have this discussion around nutrition. And nutrition, in my opinion, is the third pillar of health. And nutrition is plants, and it's meats, and it's dairy. It's I'm not just sticking to little green things that come out of the ground. And I think Dalhousie Ag has an enormous opportunity to look at this and go, let's continue our research, but let's pick apart. And the other big theme, ladies and gentlemen, is wouldn't it be cool if Dal Ag started to formalize research around the needs of the region? And if you look at the needs of the region, it is health, it is nutrition, it's predictable food supply. The fact that we suffer from the highest chronic disease, but yet we are so incredibly nutrient deficient, I call it a nutrition perversion. It's off kilter. Excuse me. So that's kind of just, I'm going to take a pause now. I know I've talked a fair bit here, but I really feel Dalhousie Ag has a point in time as we all reset everything with COVID, and as we come out of this incredibly challenging, economically damaging, physically, mentally, you name it. But wouldn't it be cool to do a reset and create some initiatives, some centers where we took 2 or 3 of these things? I do believe controlled environment agriculture is one of them. Nutrition, plant ingredients, and not just plant ingredients, but plant ingredients that are just as good or better than drugs. And I firmly believe that. But you need a way to grow them predictably and clean and cost effective. So yeah, my wishes would be that, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody at a later date about perhaps how we can help and collaborate, but I'll take a pause there.
Thank you, Greg. I'm scrambling notes here, trying to keep up. There are obviously things we have talked about and things we talk about in the faculty, and so the challenges from my perspective are, and I'm going to ask a little bit about this, your opinion about this, about the role in academia to getting products developed and getting us down the commercialization path. How can we be most effective, understanding that research is sometimes a long game, usually a long game. And so a little bit about your experience in that, like how do we make this the most effective relationship for us
Well,
to help startups?
I think, Jolene, what I would first do is take a look at where we are today and do an audit of the ecosystem in Atlantic Canada. And I'm frankly not a fan of all these incubators. In my opinion, they tend to be more babysitters than anything else, and they're distracting. Again, look at the oceans. In my opinion, that's a colossal mess. I know why we're doing it, but again, if you took 10% of those funds and directed into really novel initiatives at Del Ag, so again, take an audit where you are, and a lot of times it's just doing what we when we came to Truro with TruLeaf, we didn't have with Del Ag a blueprint or a prescribed. We just got her done, right? And I think with Del Ag, if you provided just the really rich soil to percolate ideas and in a very safe, predictable way. Again, you don't need massive programs, I don't think. Like this chap from India who's moving to Nova Scotia with the fertilizer, he would be, great example. Truly great example. No, my current company, Novagevity, there's so many of these companies. It's up to you guys to if you want to play in the commercialization game. I really do believe you have a big role to play because there's a lot of really bright minds there. That's what these and then if you have some money to build a little bit of infrastructure, like let's just say you had a smart farm or a controlled environment campus where, like they do at the University of Chiba. That's a great example, Jolene, of when they had an indoor vertical farm, they had greenhouses, they had hoop houses, and all on one little campus and they invited people from all over to come and learn and collaborate. The Japanese model, in my opinion, Joe, is really cool because there was a trifecta. There was academia, there was the business people, and there was government. And if when those three all work together, the magic happens. And when it's not, again, obscene. And when obscene, meaning I think the ocean model, and again, if anybody on this call, I don't mean to beat up the ocean model. I find it very frustrating to see all that money. And now another big incubator where the farmers market was. I just find that a colossal waste of money.
Okay, we're recording, but we're not sharing this recording with anybody from Oceans, so you're safe.
No, look, I know everybody there. I just think the amount of money, it's short-sighted.
Yeah.
The reality is, I get the ocean piece, but the bulk of the world right now, with what people consume and what people need for health, what people need for nutrition, and the capital and finance world, it's coming from the land.
Right. Okay, we will take questions. Kathleen, I see you're waiting in the queue there. And if anyone else wants to use the hand function, I'll try to keep track of the order here, and we'll start taking questions.
Super. What a great overview. Thank you, Greg. And of course, your enthusiasm is contagious, and I'm sure you've had that influence on folks.
Kathleen, I was worried I couldn't even get out of bed today, but see, you guys got me all fired up. So there you go.
Good on you. And to have Victoria on the call as well. Welcome back. We're happy that she's with you and doing great work. So we are working on some funky things with this design of trying to bring all sectors together. So we're working on plant protein Atlantic, trying to look at the ecosystem of what is necessary to make it viable. And of course, there's so many obstacles one could examine. And of course, you have to know the real terrain as well before you start really forging ahead. So that's quite an exciting opportunity. But I think in addition to your remarks about your personal experience and your passion, the science backs up what you're saying. We can see nutrition is deficient. We need to really up our game on nutrition. So yeah, let's have some fun with this. Let's be innovative and let's use the good science. Yeah. So if you have thoughts about plant protein and initiatives of how we can rally all the team players.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big into our world right now on plant protein. And in our drink, we did a fair bit of research and we use pea protein and hemp. There is a growing group in Canada The Canadian Food Innovation Network, CFIN, Joe Lake is the CEO. I know Joe very well. He was head of or senior R&D in McCain Foods. So Protein Industries Canada, and if Dal Ag became one of the key centers in Canada that brought together people to do core research around proteins and plant proteins, and geez, we would be the first group to start. I tell you that right now, because it's, pea protein, look, very popular. Guess what? It's becoming very expensive because of the supply chain, because of, and we don't even know yet the damage that's going to cause to drought. So on the front end, Kathleen, you have the need of the consumer and nutrition, and then right down the supply chain, you're into growing, and you're in right down to the seed. And currently I'm looking at purchasing a fair bit of land down in an area, Petite Rivière, where I spend most of my time now, to grow hemp, and because we are big fans of the protein powder from hemp and hemp seed oil, and again, to be able to work with you folks on that, and in a very measured way. We don't need to hit it out of the park, or we don't need any massive program. I was going to say the oceans again, but I beat those guys up too much today. So, you know what I mean? Like that, let's just say, Kathleen, you took controlled environment and protein, and we all got together and took measured steps, and I just think that would be fantastic. And then, because I anytime there's a company that comes into Nova Scotia now that's ag or food, I usually get a call, and there's no place for them to go. And and respectfully, Perennia has some really solid specialists. I mean, you have a problem with your farm or your crop, that's where you go to. We brought in the Q&A specialist from Perennia with our company, Novagevity. I'm not convinced it's really geared for taking a startup, but honestly, folks, a good startups, they need to do it themselves. I think I spent some time with the VP of Innovation when he came here from Israel, Startup Nation it's called in Israel, which is a fascinating group, and the data they have, Jolene, over there, that's a great model to follow, by the way. And they have some sort of incubation, but they're very disciplined. They're like, look, if the startup can't do it on its own, then maybe we shouldn't be artificially propping up. And I've seen a lot of businesses propped up artificially, and for me, look, ACOA helped me tremendously, and with TruLeaf, IRAP helped me tremendously. We paid every dollar back we borrowed from ACOA ahead of schedule. It was very important for us and for me personally to do that. So it's I mean, if you didn't have ACOA and you didn't have IRAP, a lot of and anything that Kathleen we're talking about, most of this is capital intensive, right? Or it does require a longer view and a little more money. But investors are ready for that now. They're far past the young guy with the hoodie and the software, and I want to get my money out in 3 or 4 years. That's done. Those valuations are long gone. That's still, look, the tech, but tech is in food, tech is in ag, tech. But my advice to young startups in the ag and food world is, Kathleen, use tech as one piece of the puzzle. But when you use it like TruLeaf, for instance, has a ton of tech, but it's pieced together on a much bigger model, solving a much bigger problem. And when that happens today, that's when I think the magic happens.
Great, thanks, Greg. Israel
Thank
and
you.
Singapore, they're doing excellent work. So yeah.
Yeah. And they're tough on you over there. But look, and now what they're doing is they're taking all their experience and they're taking it out into the world. So for obvious reasons.
Okay, Andy, throw it over to you.
Oh, thank you. Very inspiring, Greg. I very much appreciated it. It was very enjoyable. It gets me thinking lots, and Kathleen's doing such amazing work on the protein front and ag food well-being front. It's just amazing to have colleagues like that on the campus. The The challenge I sometimes, and maybe that's because I'm a prairie boy, I come to Nova Scotia and I look at agriculture, and the scale is something that always comes to mind. And Jolene and I have been talking about scale, and there's so many inspiring young new people that are trying to get going into agriculture. They're often starting at small scales, and how do the challenge, they often are lacking capital. We have tons of land not being used around the province.
Oh,
And we have a lot of people, like small scale people, who might be interested in small scale production systems, but they can't afford the capital to get into it, to be productive and efficient. And I sometimes get concerned about, when you're talking about trying to build a Nova Scotia food security program, do we have the scale to be competitive in terms of competing with the international markets in terms of bringing food in? And if we're developing our own marketing system and cooperatives, that might be our mechanism to do it, and supporting local and being really clear on that. But I work in the organic sector, and there is many attempts to try and upscale and cooperate, and it's still cheaper to bring lettuce in from who knows where, right? And even if it's organic. And so meanwhile, we're perfectly capable of growing it. So how do we address this issue of scale within our province when we're trying to find solutions? Do we need to really focus on the value added, the higher value products, or and like in Kathleen's case, maybe we import the protein ingredients rather than trying to grow them ourselves? Because as soon as you start talking proteins, you're talking crop rotations, 5 or 6 years to avoid disease issues and pulses. So there's other issues there. So thoughts on that?
yeah, I think just 1 second, Andrew. I'm in my office and I forgot to turn the light on, and the sun's going down, so I may just 1 sec here. I think you hit the nail on the head with scale, and through all of my learnings with TruLeaf, you use the lettuce example. That was Exhibit A. So it is difficult. So I do think the value add has a big role to play. We don't, nor should we try to compete with some of these larger operations around certain specific crops. I do think if you think of a graph, Andrew, and you think of, let's just say vegetables, let's forget fruit, let's forget meat, et cetera, for now. That intersection, in my opinion, has happened, where in the early days, what we were producing was way more expensive than California, and now you're starting to see this, and you're starting to see really significant risk in not just California, but New Mexico, Florida. So I think the value proposition, the unit economics are now favorable for anybody to set up. So when you get into scale, you also get into capital. So it depends on the model. Like, for instance, I'm very interested in creating a medicinal herb farm and growing specific type of plants that we can be value add processed, whether it's hemp, whether it's micro broccoli for sulforaphane, et cetera, that can be done. Andrew, to your point, I really think the value add point is a big one. We can do that here. So but again, that's where all of these young men and women, or perhaps even older men and women, want to start a business. They come to you guys to understand, like I did. When I did it, it wasn't really formal. I just didn't know where else to go. So I think if you look at value add and you look at capital and you look at scale, within that little circle, Andrew, there's a ton of startup opportunity there. And I think that these young companies just need a place to go to learn. To perhaps one of you we can work with on unit economics. You can help us understand that. And people that do a startup, they're very emotional, and food, particularly in agriculture, is very emotional. We want to save the world in a way, but with that emotion comes even more risk. But I do think so for instance, for us to build, we couldn't build a big vertical farm, Andrew, in Atlantic Canada because there wasn't the population, and One of my investors said to me one day, Greg, you got to go where the money and the mouths are. It's forever embedded into my head. And he was right for that model. But I think the value add, I think the protein, I think the ingredient world, like take micro broccoli, for instance, which is something I've been studying a very long time. It's a fascinating plant. I have a fridge full of it. And, and sulforaphane is a fascinating phytochemical. That's a fascinating model where I'd love to work with you folks and take it from the seed genomic, Andrew, to the powder. That's an extraordinarily valuable ingredient at the moment. And you could ship it from Truro, you could ship it from Petite Riviere.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just noticing our time. We have a couple more here, and that'll probably be it. We'll let poor Greg get back to bed. I think he's looking like he's wearing thin. We'll first go with Raj and then Sarah.
Good to see you, Greg. This is Raj. I've changed a lot, actually. A lot of hair fall, so a lot of things have. Yeah, that's right. So we joined the club. Anyway, it's great. Anyway, I think we had this conversation over a decade or so, actually, since we met first, and we've been working on this one, actually, Greg. And you made a very important point, and your contribution in that field is recognized very well. And thank you so very much in leading some of those initiatives. And as you said, the areas that you pointed out in terms of food security, food and nutritional security, as well as the ingredient point of it and controlled environmental agriculture, they're all very close to my heart as well. I think probably you mentioned Dal Ag is a center for such of those things. I think probably, I don't know how much you know about it. We set up a controlled environmental agriculture academic cluster. There are about 13 faculty members, as I know, are involved in actively. And hopefully, with all our hard work, we'll soon get a system up in there, as you were talking about it. So we are trying to work on that as well. And we certainly, I think it is about, you said about, it is about the passion that drives the whole momentous opportunities. I think this is exactly true in this food security and food and nutritional security area, and also the value added opportunities as well. I totally agree with you on that one. And I don't have any question, but the challenge that we currently face is, there are two things that I face as a challenge. I now moved from still an academic here, and I also moved into setting up such vertical farms and indoor operations with working with our industry partners. But the challenge has been actually when it comes to convincing our younger generation. They always people looking for a cheaper food, but promoting and educating our youth is one of the major challenge basically in moving that one forward. It's easy to grow, in my opinion, at least for me. Easy to produce things, easy to value add it, but at the same time, making the consumer learn about the benefits of that, the power of nature in there is one of the most challenging ones. And there comes the policymakers, I wouldn't say interface platform between consumers, politicians, and entrepreneurs actually as a platform. So I don't think that there is a deepening conversation that occurs amongst all these players. Yeah. That's where the challenge comes in terms of materializing and seeing the true value of whatever we do, because the research takes over 20 years time, and getting up there, setting up farm like this one takes about a decade of work. But at the end, when it comes to consumers, I saw personally, it is not any insult to anybody, but produce finished with indoor produced produce on a sale for $2 a piece, people are not there to buy it, but they go in for buying a lettuce brought in from somewhere else. And I saw that myself in Ontario, basically. Yeah. So I see that there's a challenge, which just made me cry there. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on it? How do you go about educating the public about the true value of it?
Well, I think, you know, when I started TruLeaf, Raj, um, you know, I saw the value proposition. It's really incredible the last 3 years, say, or 2 to 3, 4 years, where the younger generation is really educated. They want to know now. They care. And honestly, I think when I started TruLeaf, they didn't care. They didn't know, and it was just, you know. But the younger generation really, really care. One example I want to give you, Raj, a little bit is and let me back up. The younger generation care about nutrition. They care about where their food is from. So what if, Raj, we did this? And I think I presented this one day, and really quickly, I know Jolene, mindful of time, but what I would think about doing, Raj, to solve that issue is if you took institutions like hospitals or perhaps universities and then match it with an agricultural group, maybe it's a startup, maybe it's a seasoned group, and we have controlled buying. And what I mean by that is not artificial, but we go to the grower, the farmer, and say the province wants to procure X tonnage. Okay, the farmer goes, okay, you know what? I've got a guaranteed buy, and I can sell it to, and this almost gets back to Andrew's question about scale, as I can also sell it in the region or everywhere else. But now the risk has been mitigated, and that's a risk is one of the biggest contributing factors of lack of progress. And so if we started to do more of those, then all of a sudden, and there's a lot more farms right now than there's ever been, which is great news. And then that gives opportunity for auxiliary technologies like, Raj, you know, LED lighting, or, you know, and that's where anybody in Atlantic Canada working with you guys could play in the tech space. Sensors, you know, the list is very, very long. But I think the young folks today, and in my time, for, you know, 5 or 7 years ago, the capital wasn't there. But Raj, the capital there is there right now. Look, and look at this company called Milk Movement. I'm sure you folks have heard of them. Well, when they started out, I met them, and they were told to go set up in Volta downtown. I was just shaking my head, going, no, 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 no. Well, that's the wrong location. They would need maybe somewhere in near you folks where they had the tech figured out. It's the software, but they needed knowledge of the dairy industry, and I knew they do, but that was just one. And there's a couple other examples where these companies are told to go to Volta, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Agricultural and food is quite different than just writing code, right? And
Right.
so that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Get well.
Okay, last but not least, we're gonna let Sarah have her question, and then we'll let everybody go for their evening.
Before I ask my question, I just wanted to give a good example on a type of program that you just described, and it's the province of PEI has scrapped the food program in schools, and children are now eating food that is grown locally. It's from raw ingredients, and that's what is feeding the children in all of the schools. And I wish we could see that in Nova Scotia. It's much healthier, and again, it protects the growers and the restaurants that make that food from the raw ingredients. It gives them a guaranteed client, which is great to see. But my main question is, why do we need to separate ocean from land when we're talking about farming? You know, from my perspective, if we're talking quality ingredients, we have, you know, essential fatty acids only coming from marine microalgae, and we have the most efficient conversion of light to protein being in shellfish. And these systems are scalable. They are, you know, we have the local infrastructure and you know, environment for that. And so to me, I think that we need to include oceans in our food production, especially if we're taking a look at where we are and what we have locally. If we want to have food security locally, we have to include the oceans. So I would just challenge you to not disparage the ocean so much.
No.
It's
Listen,
this place of
look,
huge
I'm
ingredients.
not disparaging the oceans. It's just the execution of it and the capital, I think,
know.
is a little aggressive. Sarah, listen, look, my company currently is looking at seaweed as an ingredient. My company currently uses algae for an omega-3 source. I think, and this is where Dal Ag could play, to Sarah, to your point, there's most certainly a lot of crossover. There's extraction. I know there's some work being done in research on shellfish down in the Assurance Center, Cape Breton. No. I firmly believe that. And again, the seaweed as a nutritional ingredient is Exhibit A, and that's perhaps where you folks come in to help the company understand how to make it into a value-add food product.
And I guess how to connect the two sides when we are thinking ingredients or we are thinking local products.
Yeah.
What can we gain from land and what could be included from the ocean instead of just always looking at plant-based ingredients?
And Sarah, I think that's a great opportunity for you folks to be that bridge, to be the educator, because I don't think the general population truly understands that. It would be
Okay, I have lots of other questions to ask, but I know with time, I'll stop right now.
Well,
Great
Jolene,
to meet you. Very interesting.
nice to meet you, and Jolene could connect us, Sarah.
Yeah, we might have you come to campus for a visit sometime, Greg, and have more of an in-person chat. The other piece to that conversation, Sarah, to me that scares me a little bit is the lab-generated food ingredients. That's also something that is coming up the rear that we need to be thinking about. And so there's a lot that we could be doing to build bridges between lots of different industries. So 4:32, we've done well. If I had known that you were so ill this morning, Greg, I probably would have given you the hook off for the day, but thank you so much for pulling it together and coming, because we had great turnout, and I think that's great. We usually do a lot of academic type visitor speakers, but this is a different sort of engagement, and I think it gives us some ideas we need to go back to the drawing board and think about. So it's good.
Again, I would love to come up anytime.
Thanks so much, Greg, and thanks more everyone for attending today. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great.
Good night, everybody.